Hello, and welcome to the GIS feature demonstration video of the Mining Cadastre Administration System, also known as the MCAS. For the purpose of this demonstration, we will assume that you are familiar with the Revenue Development Foundation's product offerings within the various sectors. Today, we would specifically like to highlight the Mining Cadastre and the GIS features that help make the MCAS a powerful mining cadastre solution. The MCAS system introduces a robust and configurable workflow process which brings together a powerful set of tools for mining rights management. MCAS allows users to manage rights through all application stages and tracks each license through its full lifecycle. The application and lifecycle monitoring process is simplified through the implementation of powerful dashboard and report visualizations, including the integration of a comprehensive GIS server. This video will focus on three main aspects of MCAS GIS: the key GIS features, how these features are integrated into the MCAS workflow, and the overall map module. It is important to understand that the GIS functions that are native to MCAS are a result of the integration with GeoSolutions GeoServer. GeoServer is an industry-proven open-source geographical information system supported by an expert open-source community. The solution provides the following strategic advantages. There are no license or purchase fees associated with GeoServer, and therefore MCAS can remain royalty and license free. It is open source in nature and publicly available. It provides powerful standard APIs which allow integration with popular third-party GIS solutions such as Esri ArcGIS, Google Maps, Yahoo Maps, and a range of other tools. GeoServer also comes pre-installed with OpenLayers and access to the OpenLayers map library. This library offers a wealth of updated GIS files free of charge. However, if a country has a specific requirement or wants to load its own national boundaries, GeoServer provides the tools to load these into its database. In order to understand how the GIS features have been embedded into MCAS, we'll log into the system and we'll take you through the workflow of registering an application through to licensing and show you the areas where GIS is key. In this demonstration, I won't be going through the menus and the navigation of the system, but we'll focus solely on the maps and the map feature within the workflow. In order to get a full understanding of the GIS features, it's important to understand the workflow terminology that guides the administrative process. Each application goes through several different stages. The first stage is registration. Registration is done to ensure completeness and compliance of an application. Once an application has been registered and is seen as complete, it can be passed on through the workflow till it becomes a full-fledged license. The steps are registration, validation, where GIS becomes key, approval, payment, and then put into a license pending stage. Once it's in license pending, it's up to a manager or someone that's mandated to approve, to create the licenses and make sure that the client gets a copy of their license. Once a license has been issued, the system takes over the lifecycle management of that entity. Let's zoom into an application that has already been pre-registered. On this page, you see the different sections of information that has previously been entered by the clerk. Here you can see that this application is still in the registration phase, which means that it is at the beginning of the workflow process. The next tab shows any payments that have been made to date. Location shows the spatial overview of the application and the coordinate schedule that's been submitted. We'll come back to this later. The Documents tab shows any documents that have been attached to date and the history of this registration up to now, so the application moving through the workflow. At this point, you may have noticed that the plot being applied for has a bit of a non-shape. I think it's also important to remember that within the registration phase, it's not the clerk's responsibility to make sure that the plot being applied for adheres to the rules and regulations in the Act. It's purely collecting the information, making sure that the registration is complete, and passing that on through the workflow to those who have the mandate to make the corrections for the specific sections. What this does do is gives the clerk visual cues as to what's being entered. Although they might not be able to shift, for example, the corner of the overlap that's occurred here with an existing license, what they will be able to do is see that this has an odd shape, and this could be due to data entry issues. So before passing this on to validation, they could actually go into edit mode and try and correct some of the point crossings like we see here. Now, just to give you a bit of an overview as to what we're looking at here, we are looking at the result of the data entry that was done for the different coordinates. Once it's on the map, we have several different quick filters that we can use to filter through the different licenses that already exist. And here we see I've toggled the active licenses. Once you've toggled the active licenses, you can zoom in and out of the map and click on the licenses that surround the applicant's choice. As mentioned, we may want to take a look at how this was entered. So I will take this registration or this application into edit mode, move through the workflow. This is the pre-registered information that we saw in the previous tab. And I will get to the coordinate data entry section. This section is purely made for entering the schedules that are submitted and has similar functions to what we saw earlier on the overview. Now, in order to correct this or to shift these points, I can click on the map and see the different beacon points, and we can switch around either one. You see when I hover over, I see which beacon is being affected. And at the same time, the selection changes on the right-hand side to show you which coordinate group is actually being represented by this beacon point or this coordinate point. Now, what I'll try and do for this demo is switch these two around and hope that this will make a sensible polygon once I've done that. Now, on the right-hand side, you see the panel where you can enter new coordinates. You could add new coordinates, and you could remove coordinates. You could change the order of the coordinates. But for the purpose of this demonstration, what I will do is I will switch the A and the B coordinates around to make a sensible plot. In order to do this, I'll use these functions up on the right-hand side and just push B up, and there we go. Now we've got a plot that makes sense, although it still looks like it's overlapping here. But as I mentioned earlier on, it is not the responsibility of the clerk to shift this plot anywhere else. So once we've made the correction, we can actually go in and save this, move to the next point. Once I complete this application, it is now ready for validation. I will complete the application. At this point, the application has been saved. This function at the top will send the data through to validation. And here we can see validation. Now remember, I'm logged in as a super user. The super user gets to see every single step of the workflow. Traditionally, this is installed in an institution. Once I have completed a registration and sent it to validation, the clerk will no longer be able to see this validation module. This validation module is tied to a user right. So when you log into the system and you have the rights to do validation, you will see a list of applications that have come through for validation, and you can go through and validate those applications.
In step 2 of the workflow process, we have a number of values that the clerk enters. We have a base value. The base value equals the measure or the units that a country uses in order to depict area of a polygon. In some countries they use cadastral units. In this demo we use acres. The system's been configured to enter everything in acres. And it's important to note that with this configuration we have set the system to accept manual area entry. If the system is set up for automatic area calculation, what would happen is the base value would be tied directly to the area calculation done by the GIS software. Now let's take a look at an example of a configuration where the square kilometers are not necessarily entered automatically, but are indicated on the basis of a given polygon. As I mentioned earlier on, we have three options: manual entry, automatic entry, or semi-automatic. Which means that if you have schedules that you receive from the client and you need to authenticate the square kilometers that they have entered on their schedules, you can do that by comparing it to what the GIS application has pre-calculated. In this case, we can see that I've configured a pre-calculation mode where I can go in and choose the calculation that the system has given me in order to increase accuracy of the area calculated for the polygon, and I can move down the line and answer all the rest of the validation questions. If we look at the configuration of this system, you can see that this one's been set up for square kilometer measure, and we have additional questions that need to be answered by the validating officer. We've already put in the base value, and now we need to go to the actual recommendation. In a lot of countries, the GIS officer or validating officer makes recommendation to a board or an approving entity before the application goes through for actual approval and payment. For recommended area, we have three different choices: available, available adjusted, and not available. Available meaning there are no overlaps and there's no breach of regulation, and the application or the plot that's been applied for can be spatially validated and moved on to the approval stage. We also have available adjusted. This might not be the case for every single country, but in this configuration, you would allow the validating officer to go in and make slight adjustments to the plot in order to accommodate the application. There is a formal communication procedure that usually follows with the client, which I won't get into now, but this just shows technically that the system supports validating officer adjustments if this is necessary for the country configuration. And of course, not available in case a plot is in breach of the regulation or has a significant overlap or other issues during the validation period. And these recommendations would go through to the board or to an additional approving party before being either declined or approved and turned into a license. So it's important to know that at this stage, the validating officer is purely looking at the spatial aspects of the application and not so much at the approval process. But the validating officer can at this point make a recommendation to the board as to whether this license application is in breach. For this demo purpose, I'll make this plot available, seeing as there's no overlaps. And I will go through and explain some of the items on the menu bar. Cancel speaks for itself and save. If we were to be midstream in this application and we weren't completing it, we would save the application, come back to it again. We have Edit GIS, which the validating officer can use to make any adjustments if necessary. Download Esri shapefile, which is self-explanatory. We'll download a shapefile that can be imported into third-party applications. And complete, meaning that you've done your suggestions, you've done your calculations, you've looked at the actual plot, made sure it's not overlapping with other plots, and you have completed it with your suggestions. If we take a look at the Edit GIS function, it's the same functionality that we went over earlier during the clerk's view. The only difference is that this edit procedure takes place during validation and is actually passed on as final data to the approval stage. So to recap, we have the registrar or the clerk entering the basic GIS features as presented on a schedule, which is then passed to the validating officer. The validating officer has the right to make changes or make suggestions at this point and pass that on to the approving party. Once all the recommendations have been done, the validating officer will press complete and will send this application and the GIS results through to the approval stage, where the approver will go through the process of taking this on through to payment and to licensing. At this point, I'd like to take a closer look at the overall map module. The map module can be found under the Maps menu. And once you click the Maps menu, you usually would not get this map, but I use this map for demonstration purposes to show all possible plots that possibly could show up on the map. This means that no filters have been applied. I've removed all the default filters, and I've come up with a Sierra Leone plot showing every single plot. The reason I did this is to show that every single color has to do with a specific status when you're filtering. Everything that's green, for example, is an active license. Everything that is blue is an application, etc. And this way you can see the differences when you mix and match filters between the different plots as you apply the different filters. Now what I would like to do here is I would like to apply a filter and see a map with only the currently active licenses. In order to do that, I move over to the filter pane. The filter pane has a number of different groups. The first group being the license status, license types, then the type of minerals being searched for or being mined, any specific companies or owners that you possibly would want to filter on, or a specific region that you would want to concentrate on. In this case, what I'll do is I'll create a map that has all the active licenses and apply the filter to the current state. So here you can see the different active licenses. Once you have an overview of the active licenses, you can click on a specific license and get an overview that has links to the actual license and the owner. The map is zoomable, so you can zoom into specific plots and drill down to the license. Here you see I've drilled down to EL6 2015, and here you can see your active license. So in a nutshell, that gives an overview of how GIS has been integrated into MCAS, the application and validation process. Thank you very much for your interest in RDF products, and we look forward to your feedback.